All right, let me please know if you can see my screen. I'm sharing it in 3, 2, 1. It's being shared right now. Can you see it?
No.
No, you cannot see my screen?
I cannot see your screen.
Okay. Let's try it again. Can you see
Hello,
my screen?
Natalie. Yeah, we can see your screen. Natalie,
Awesome.
where are you from? Hello, Dom. Dom, where are you from? Charlestown, South Carolina. Hello, Natalie. Dom. So Dom is obviously my brother and business partner. And every time we've done a podcast in the last 2-3 weeks, he showed up in a different place. To which the podcast host will go, "Oh, hey guys, where you from?" Dom will be like, "Oh, I'm in North Macedonia." Are you? What are you doing there?
Yeah, it's your campaign is very fun, like all internal campaigns are fun, but your campaign is special because it's you and your brother. Usually it's just one speaker that we are promoting, but no, Dom and Elliot, we're pitching them both on podcasts, and podcasts would love it.
The man who's got the most dirt on me in my life.
You're joining
Got a
the
couple of
podcast.
people joining from Bangladesh, from Cyprus. Very nice.
Amazing.
Chris
All
Howard.
right.
I used to work with a chap called Chris Howard.
All right.
Should we dive in?
Let's dive in. So podcast networking, winning 6-figure deals from working with podcast hosts, a topic that I'm super excited about. But Elliot, you actually had quite interesting experience with this specifically quite recently, haven't you?
Yes, and we're going to go into it throughout the course of the webinar, which I will be calling a podcast by mistake. It actually happened last night. A live example of how to potentially win 6-figure deals whilst working with podcast hosts. So very excited. And whilst we're just waiting for a couple of more people to join, I want everybody to use the chat and comment number 1 if you have ever appeared on a podcast as a guest. I want to see how many of our audience are actively, use number 1, actively using podcasting at the moment. Quite a few people.
Wow. Yeah, a lot of people. That's impressive.
Scott Turner, I like the emoji. I like that.
Well, we also had from Chris, yes, and from Stuart, yes. But it's all makes the same. It's all the same thing. So a lot of people appeared on the podcast here. Impressive. Michael,
So,
6 to 9 times, lost count as spread over multiple years. That's a lot.
So we've got a lot of 1s. Let's see how many 2s we get. So comment number 2, if you've ever worked with a host as a result of your interview. How many of you have actually worked with, got referrals, turned them into a customer? How many of you have actually...
Nice. Stuart? So we have 2 2s. Do we have more?
That is exactly why we are doing this webinar. What a perfect example. What a perfect example.
So as you can see, there are a lot of people who appear on podcasts as guests. We had a lot of 1s, but we had only, I think, 2 2s. So let's change it. And the thing is with podcasting, the problem is that creating tangible business opportunities from podcasts is quite unpredictable. Most people, they rely on listeners to reach out to them. They do all the heavy lifting. They prepare call to actions. They prepare introductions. And whilst it happens, it really happens that listeners will start reaching out to you, it is not so predictable. And that's what we'll be basically talking about during this webinar, how you can turn relationships with podcast hosts into predictable business opportunities.
This is a live shot of Jakob on his cycling holiday in Nice.
Yeah, as a Tour de France, just ignore the school bus. I think that's not the footage from France. But the thing is, 99% of guests, they focus on what they cannot control. So as I mentioned, they prepare their call to actions, they prepare for the podcast interview, they prepare their talking points. And all of this is amazing. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't be doing it. It's very important that you do all of these things. But although if you do all of these things correctly, you do a really good job as a guest, there's no guarantee that someone will reach out to you. or reach out to you immediately after the podcast interview. It might happen a couple of months after, weeks, or we heard even years, but it is not very predictable. But only 1% of guests, they focus on what they can directly influence. And during the last webinar, we talked about how you can actually take your podcast interviews and turn them into content. So that's one of the things that you can do to influence the outcome of your podcast interview. But during this webinar, we'll be talking about how you can take the one guaranteed interaction that you will always have in each podcast interview, which is the interaction with the host, and how you can actually get the most out of it. So my promise is that by the end of this webinar, you will know how to create win-win opportunities by focusing on your interaction with hosts. And this is something exciting as well, Elliot, isn't it?
Yeah, so at the very end of the webinar, no catch, we will be giving away a gift completely free worth £1,500, 1,500. Very exciting. Jakob convinced me to do this, not overly happy about it. However, it is exciting because it means that potentially some of you guys will see value of what the podcasting space looks like. So let's fly into the agenda. A couple of quick housekeeping. We have the chat, which is just a general space for people to engage, comment, and generally just chat. And we've got Q&A for the questions. If you do have questions, typically when we do these webinars, there are a lot of questions that pop up. We will answer them as we go, but if you could make sure they are in the Q&A channel rather than the chat, the Q&A part is actually much easier to manage from my side rather than the chat where things get lost. So ask the questions throughout. We'll be trying to answer them as they go. I'm monitoring the chat and the Q&A box. So ask them as they go, and Jakob and I will answer those questions. So in the next 45 minutes, we are going to go through what is podcast networking. We're going to explain it in a fairly granular detail. We're going to give you 3 success stories, as well as one of my own, 4 podcast networking strategies. So we're going to break down exactly what those strategies are. The biggest challenges, because a lot of these webinars just say that everything is perfect and these strategies always work. There are challenges, and we're going to highlight exactly what they are to help you guys. And then finally, a step-by-step plan of how to do it. None of this is rocket science, I promise you. A lot of this is common sense, but that's not true. Hardly anybody is fully utilizing it. And then right at the end, we're going to have a final Q&A and just wrap up any of those final questions that you may have.
And we actually have the first question in the Q&A box from Root. So I'll answer this live. Is it correct that I can only see 2 persons? Yes, that's correct. Myself and Elliot, we are the only panelists here.
Hi, Rude.
All right, thank you, Ruth, for the question and a great use of that Q&A box. So if you have more questions, please use the box right to the chat bubble in your Zoom UI. So
Jakob, introduce yourself.
Oh yeah, I can. So introduction. So I'm Jakob, I'm co-founder and CMO here at Speak on Podcasts. And I started this agency with Mark Colgan, my co-founder, in June 2020. And since then, we've booked more than 2,500 interviews for many different speakers. We work with more than 150 speakers on more than 120 campaigns. The reason why there's a difference between 150 and 120 is simple, because some campaigns are with multiple speakers that we book, let's say 4 different speakers from one company on podcasts. So it's been an amazing journey so far. We got the messages of all these speakers in front of millions of people, of their ideal customers, and it's really an amazing time. Elliot, what about you?
Yeah, so joint CEO along with my brother Dom. We own and invest in agencies. We were introduced to Jakob and Mark back end of last year, and had absolutely fell in love with not only both of them, but what Speak on Podcasts was all about. Oh. So we completed we can be nice. We completed the acquisition December last year. And I've had the pleasure of working closely with Jakob, but also the whole team throughout the last 7-8 months.
And Elliot, I'm enjoying it as well. It's really an amazing experience.
All right, good. Let's dive in.
Podcast networking, winning six-figure deals from working with podcast hosts. So to you, El.
Yep. So let's explain exactly what they are. So there's 3 monetization methods within podcasting. You've got podcast listeners, so you can turn them into subscribers, brand evangelists, or customers. You've got networking with the host, which is really what we're going to major on today, asking for referrals, organizing potential webinars afterwards, partnering up, or turning them into customers. Or finally, you've got your existing audience, so you can share the podcast, your podcast interviews, to further nurture everybody in your network. And as I've said, we are going to go heavily, quite tactfully or tactically, into networking with the host.
And just in case, if you are interested in, the existing audience part, that's exactly the last webinar that we did, which was how to take your podcast interview and turn it in content. So just drop yes in the comment section if you want us to share the link in the email after we send the replay of this webinar. Just drop yes in the comment section, and we'll include the replay link there as well, so you can watch it. It's really good that you get comprehensive understanding of of all the things that you can do with podcasting.
So the traditional way of appearing on a podcast, whilst it is good, obviously we are a podcast booking agency. We sing from the hilltops, from the rooftops, that this is a good way to get in front of your audience and your target audience. It is very hard to control the outcome, and it's not guaranteed. So there's 3 simple steps. You appear on a podcast as a guest, fairly straightforward. Typically towards the middle or end of the podcast, the host will invite you to give your call to action. So essentially what it is you're selling, what you're talking about. And then once you've done that, you essentially just wait for the listeners to reach out. You are hoping that your message has somewhat resonated with your audience. And then it's kind of up to the audience to then reach out to you. This does work, and it does work. There is evidence that it works. It's worked for a lot of our clients, but it is unpredictable. You've got no control over the outcome. And what we're going to talk about today is really trying to control what you can control. Networking with the host and using that as a platform to do business is one of the few things that you can actually do to control your own narrative.
So we already covered quite a lot, about why, it is quite unpredictable to ignore the strategy and focus only the listeners to reach out to you. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box, and we'll be answering them throughout, or at the end of this webinar. I want to say podcast.
I know it's my mind automatically goes to podcast, not webinar.
Yeah. All right, so let me propose a different way, which is a podcast networking way, which is guaranteed because the interaction with the host is guaranteed and you are in control. So first, you appear on a podcast as a guest. That's quite straightforward. Second, you focus on providing tons of value. And third, you build the relationship with the host. So this is super high-level overview of how this strategy works, and we'll be breaking down each of these steps further. So unlike passively waiting for listeners to reach out to you, you're leveraging the only guaranteed interaction that you have, which is the one with the host, as I mentioned. Because your interaction with the host is always guaranteed. The thing is, and you will see this word, the red word here, quite often, because podcast hosts are super connectors. By building relationships with them, you can tap into their networks, collaborate further, and create business opportunities. They're business owners themselves. They interview amazing people who can become your guests. Who can become your customers, or they can even become your customers themselves, because, as I mentioned, they're executives, they're business owners, and so on. But most importantly, they can really get you in front of the people that you want to be in front of. They can connect you with the right people. Now, the question is this for you? And so I'll be going through these models. You see 3 numbers here, 1, 2, and 3. So if any of these apply to you, please drop them in the comments. And if none of these apply to you, just write your industry. So we identified 3 different industries that this strategy works for the best. So first is SaaS and tech businesses. So if you own really a software as a service company or any tech business, this really works. Coaches and consultants, really whatever kind. So whether you're a business coach or fitness coach, relationship coach, or B2B agency owners. Elliot, you can ignore the chat. You don't need to type 3 there. I know that you're a B2B business owner. And Dom as
number
well,
4
I know that
something
you're
else.
watching.
I felt left out.
And if none of these apply to you, just type your industry there, because we would actually love to hear about the people who are appearing on this podcast, on this webinar as well. And there are 3 different pillars to make this strategy work. So you appear on podcasts, obviously. You can spend at least 20 minutes extra per interview. So that means for preparation, for following up after the podcast with the host and so on. And you have a high customer lifetime value. So at least $5,000 of customer lifetime value to really make it worth your while. I see a lot of unread messages in the chat. Elliot, how many did we have? A lot of people from these different industries. Have you seen some major pattern there?
A lot of 2s, a lot of 3s, a small number of 1s. Quite varied. A lot of 2s and 3s, which is quite typical because of, I guess, our backgrounds.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. So
you're welcome.
I want to share, a couple of success stories that we've seen with our customers. And, little caveat here, when we started this agency, we thought that most of the results will come from listeners reaching out to our customers, people who we book on podcasts. But after we started delivering the service, 2,500 interviews later, we saw that the biggest results and ROI our customers get is by networking with hosts. And here are some of the stories. So this is a David story, and he won $35K a SaaS deal for a white label e-com platform. So we're booking David on 24 e-commerce podcasts. And in his second podcast interview, the host actually asked him, hey, I work with a ton of agencies in the e-commerce space, and I would like to white label your platform and offer it to my customers. And that's exactly what happened. And David, as a result, won a $35K SaaS deal for his e-com platform. Second example, closing a 6-figure cybersecurity deal after one interview. And this example actually demonstrates very well of what you need to do to get to these results. Because when we work with Brian, we noticed that they spend so much time preparing for the interview, and then following up with the host after the interview goes live, and then also promoting the episode. And as a result, the host asked, hey, we recently had a breach, and we would like to explore what it would what it would look like to work with you. And they were quite early stage company, this cybersecurity customer. And this was a huge win for them. And it only happened because they spent a lot of time working with a host and putting enough effort into building that relationship. And finally, the last example for coaches and consultants here, enrolling hosts as new coaching clients. So this is Amy, one of our earliest customers. So we're booking her on leadership shows, and she's an executive coach. And as a result, some of the hosts actually decided to work with her because her approach is very unique, and the way we presented her, it was very unique. So hosts decided to reach out to her and work with her because she also delivered great experience as a guest. So those are 3 examples. And 4 networking strategies. So do we have anything in the chat, El, before you dive into these main strategies?
Is there anything in the chat?
Let me check.
No, we are good. I was chuckling. You look like a Simpson then, because obviously your screen is very yellow. When you flip the screen, your face lit up. Let's get into the 4 different strategies. So strategy number 1 is introductions. So at the end of most podcasts, as most of people will know, because you've all been on, majority of people have been on podcast, hence why you're here. You'll have sort of 5-10 minutes to really get to know, to network with that individual or that host, and just start building that relationship. And we'll go into how you can start building that relationship before that even happens. And typically at the end of the interview, a host will ask, is there anything I can do for you? Is there anything I can help? Any introductions? Anything at all? Hosts are quite forthcoming with trying to help. They are super connectors. So one of the key things that we often might do is be quite forthright and ask for introductions. If we've done our research, we know the show, we know our potential customers are going to be on this particular show or have been, ask the host if they'd be happy to introduce you to that particular host. This is just an example email that we've built. And the bottom line is, like a lot of things in sales, which is loosely what we're talking about on this, which is making money. If you don't ask, you don't get. Onto the second strategy, collaborating with a host. Live example, Dom and I did a podcast about 2 months ago with 2 other guys out in the US. And what we're doing right now to try and leverage both of our networks, we've got a combined audience on LinkedIn of around about 80,000 people, 80,000 connections. We're going to be doing a LinkedIn Live to all of our audience sometime in September when we align the dates, because the interview was so powerful. We all we got on really well. There was real good energy. We think there is more that we can leverage to our audiences than just recording a podcast interview. That, again, we can't quite control the narrative. We can't quite control the listenership. So we are now mutually combining our LinkedIn audiences, and we're going to do something slightly different. Again, future collaborations with a host is another way, the second strategy. The third is to potentially turn those hosts into customers. Jakob gave a real good example of the CyberSec, one of our clients, one of our previous clients. Again, build that relationship. If there is an opportunity, this would typically happen before an email even comes in, where you start to build the rapport, build the relationship. It may be something that you subtly drop in once you've done your research at the end of the interview, and then follow up with this email. Again, it's just a real nice way to just drop in that we could potentially do something else here. Would you be happy to help? Shall we discuss further? Again, none of this is hugely rocket science, but massively underutilized.
Yes.
And the final one, again, this should just be something that we are all naturally doing, but sometimes I'm guilty of this, get a little bit lazy. We leverage social media. So connect with the people who have commented and liked. And one, Jakob, you were saying a really good story about the screenshots. I think you just commented there, but something that Jakob really tries to push us and our customers to do is to take a quick screenshot, maybe take a quick photo of you and the host waving, straight away go and post that on your LinkedIn, tag them in it. And again, you're just really trying to promote yourself as a proactive guest, building that relationship, building that rapport.
It is really what boils down to. We're doing these things to establish the relationship with the host. And when we mention leverage social media here, if you see that the host posts on their profile about your episode, just comment there, reply on questions that the people in the comment section ask. Maybe you can connect with these people in the comment section as well, because they already know you. They maybe watched the video or they read the post, so they know who you are, and you're building network on LinkedIn or whatever platform you choose of very highly relevant people who already know, like, and trust you because they listened to the episode or at least the snippet here on social media.
So guys, I want you to comment in the chat which strategy you think you most align to. Number 1, asking for introductions. Number 2, collaborating with the host. Number 3, turning the host into a potential customer. Or number 4, leveraging social media. Comment 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the chat, and I want to see which one is going to get the most traction, because I am curious.
We see a lot of 2s and 4s as well.
2s, 4s is 2, 3, and 4. I like that. I like that, John.
Yeah. Nice. Thank you, everyone.
Amazing.
All right. So we talked about how great opportunity this is, but we also want to be fully transparent here and also share the challenges and what are the potential obstacles when it comes to this specific strategy. So the challenge number one is effort and time. You know, the strategy cannot be automated and you need at least 20 minutes per interview to make it work. Now, how do you spend these 20 minutes? We'll be talking more about this more in detail in the upcoming slides, but you need to prepare for the podcast interview. Ideally, you should listen to at least a portion of a podcast episode so you get the idea of the energy of the podcast hosts and the way they ask questions and so on. And then after the episode, you want to promote it. You want to send a thank you message or maybe thank you video voice note to podcast hosts, just saying, hey, thanks a lot for inviting me onto the show. You wouldn't believe, but most guests actually don't do it. You know, they appear on a podcast and they almost disappear. So it takes time, and unfortunately, it can be automated. You really need to build that relationship yourself, but it doesn't take so much time considering the upside.
Yeah.
Challenge number two, consistency. You know, the longer you focus on building these relationships, the more results you will get. It's as simple as that. It's not only about building more of these relationships with more podcast hosts, but also being consistent with nurturing the existing relationship with the podcast hosts who already interviewed you. Because there is quite a delay from recording time to the publishing time. So there might be a couple of weeks, couple of months before the interview goes live. And before the interview goes live, you want to interact with the host on social media, maybe share what you liked about their, newly released episodes, and just stay in touch, or at least like their stuff on social media so you're still top of mind. Challenge number three, it's not for everyone. So as we mentioned, your customer lifetime value should be at least above $5,000 and you should be in the B2B industry. It might work for B2C as well, but we've seen the biggest success stories in the B2B industry. Challenge number four, it's hard to delegate. After you are building the relationship with the podcast host, it's very difficult to delegate to a virtual assistant because they will never have the context that you have from being interviewed by the host, from talking before the interview, after the interview, and it really needs to be done by you. But as I mentioned, it only takes around 20 minutes. And the challenge number five, it's quite hard to scale. One interview equals one relationship. So to create more opportunities and more relationships, you need to appear on more podcasts. So I would really consider this strategy if you are planning to, or you are already appearing on more podcasts, throughout the year, let's say like at least 3, 4, 5 podcasts a year to make it worth, because then it really starts making more sense rather than it's just ad hoc that you receive an invitation and then for 1 year you don't receive another invitation. So it's quite important to have scale there.
I'm just going to take the time. You just lit up like a Simpson again, which is very entertaining. Question, Jakob, from Octavian. Octavian, I'd love to know if that is your real name or if that's your agency name, but what are some ways you can encourage guests to actively share and interact with the podcast content posted?
So I think that you're speaking from podcast hosts perspective.
Sounds like it.
And I talked about this specifically with a lot of podcast hosts because they have this issue that they appear, they interview a guest, and then the guest doesn't promote anything. And what it boils down to is you need to make it really easy for podcast guests to promote your episode. So ideally, you should provide pretty much everything for them to just copy paste, or give them some tools to create content themselves. Because very often we as content creators or podcast hosts are very quite often used to create content, but most people aren't. For most people to sit and write a piece of content based on the experience they just had, it's difficult. So if you give them as much guidance as you can, really like completely over deliver on what you will give them, quote images, videos, explanation on how to write the post, how to post it. It can be just one pager, one Google folder, and you share it with them and you make it as simple as possible for them to post it. You will see that they will start posting it more.
Jakob, thanks for that. I'm just going to read out a comment from Craig because I think it really highlights why we're doing this webinar. Craig says, I host a podcast and it never ceases to amaze me how passive guests are and how many opportunities they miss for a symbiotic relationship before and after recording and publishing their interview. And Craig, I am so glad you've said that, because obviously Jakob and I, we see this all too often. Hence why we're doing this webinar. We think that there are so many opportunities missed. So thank you for saying that. There's a few more questions popped in. If you've got any other questions, pop them in the chat. I'm going to dive back into the webinar and I'll answer them just after this next section, because I'm keen to get into step by step how to do it right. So this is what you should do before each podcast interview. And guys, none of this is rocket science. I'm really sorry if you expected some huge, sexy, elaborate strategy. A lot of this is going back to basics and doing the basics well. But like with any sales call, this is somewhat aligned to sales. Learn about the host. So doing your research about the host, their company, and their podcast. Based on that research, decide which of the 4 strategies that we've literally just gone through is the best one for you. Even if it's just the 4th one, which is leveraging your social media, you are giving value to yourself, you're giving value to the host. If the other 3 naturally pop up, we just let that manifest.
Yeah.
So making sure we decide on that strategy. Sorry, go on, Jakob.
Yeah, I think that's, why you need to prepare for or learn more about the host, is that if you want to collaborate with the host, maybe do some organize some webinar or something, this host, you will probably notice that they might already have a network established. They have a lot of followers on social media. So for that reason, it might be better to tap into that existing network even more, hence the collaboration idea. But then you might see a podcast host who is quite quiet on social media, but they're interviewing amazing guests from really high-profile companies that you would like to work with. And then the first strategy would make sense, to ask for introductions. So it's really important that you learn not only about the podcast, but about the host as well. You go on their LinkedIn profile, you see what they're posting about, if they're posting about something, and what is the company they're working for, or what is their company doing.
Step number 2 is be a fantastic guest. So what does that actually mean? Preparing for the interview. This is the key here. Reaching out before the recording date, obviously delivering tons of value. That, I guess, is kind of a prereq. But the key here, and what we're really trying to emphasize, is doing your research and preparing for the interview, proactively building that relationship with the host. As Craig has just perfectly highlighted why we're doing this webinar, so many guests don't do that. Even if you just reach out saying, hey, Craig, I'm really looking forward to coming onto your podcast, a couple of little lines about you, just helping them with their research, helping them, almost guiding them in the conversation of what to talk about. It's going to put you in such a great light and such a good stead before you've even had a one-to-one conversation like Jakob and I are now. So in our eyes, that is what being a fantastic guest means. A lot of people will read that first line and be a fantastic guest and think, okay, I just need to smash the interview out the park. That's one small element of it. There is the before and there is the after as well that we need to take into account. And
I want to mention that, what helps our customers a lot is this mindset shift. When you start treating basically each podcast interview as a networking opportunity, because it changes something in your head that you will start thinking about, okay, what can I do to make this relationship better? So it's not a podcast interview anymore. It is a networking opportunity. It is an opportunity to build a relationship. And then you start thinking about the things that you do before, after, and during differently, because you think about it more long-term rather than this is just an interview and I will disappear after 20 minutes once we're done.
And that leads nicely on to step 3, which is don't disappear. Once the episode's recorded, fantastic. Send a thank you message, share the post on social media, write a review. I've seen a couple of the chats. I haven't had a chance to look at them, but I saw something about a review pop up. And again, it highlights Craig's point, who is a podcast host. A lot of this isn't rocket science, but it goes to show how little it's done. And one of the things that I keep on harping on to all of our team at the moment around building deep, meaningful relationships is offering value up front. So an example of that might be, let's just say I've done an interview which is all around leaders in the agency space. I'm fairly well connected in the agency space. One way that I could offer value is introducing the host to 3 or 4 different guests. Nothing off my back. It's going to take me 10 minutes all in. Quick introduction, off I pop. I'm giving free value to my network, but also the host as well. So a couple of quick examples there. And then the final one is ask. Once you've given that value, I mean, ask sounds like you're being really forthright. However, in my experience, I've done 15 to 20 podcasts in the last 4 months or so. After every recording, the host, you'll have sort of 5 minutes, 10 minutes with a conversation, little get to know, talk about various different things that popped up. They'll nearly always offer their help. They'll nearly always ask and say, if there's anything I can help with, if there's any introductions I can make, let me know, drop me a line, stay connected. They will always sign off by that. And a live example, Dom and I did a podcast last night with quite a big podcast, somebody who exited their business 3 or 4 years ago. And it was a conversation around M&A. And we were talking about our plans, where we are. At the end of the interview, he said, listen, you're obviously UK based. If you need feet on the ground in the US on your next acquisition, I'm your guy. I am your guy for that. I am actively looking for opportunities. We could potentially collaborate, partner up. I want to work with you guys. So a live example of just taking that 5-10 minutes afterwards, proactively getting to know, it genuinely does work. This isn't complete BS, guys. It genuinely does work.
Yeah, usually, they say, let's stay in touch. You say, yeah, definitely. But how often did you actually stay in touch? Did you actually stay in touch, right? It's about being diligent with this, staying in touch, right? So actually treating it as a relationship, and reaching out after a while, because these opportunities will happen.
And the final disclaimer is never to force it. If it feels weird to ask, it probably is. The reason we're sort of putting this disclaimer in is because what we don't want to do is for you just to force some form of, I don't know, ask or energy. If it's not right, like with any relationship, there's probably a reason as to why it's not right. If the energy's off or the vibe is off, don't force it, because you'll just further damage what little relationship is there. What we're trying to promote here is building genuine relationships by giving value, being a fantastic guest. This will lead to other opportunities, could even lead to more guesting opportunities. Not to force it. I know it sounds like common sense, but we wanted to just almost caveat what we were saying.
Definitely. I mean, we are good with time, so I think that this is actually a good moment to take a moment, and if you have any questions, just drop them in the Q&A. In a second, we'll go into the recap and that 1,500 pounds gift that we prepared for you. But we've covered a lot, challenges, opportunities, different strategies. So if there's some question that you have on mind, please drop them in the Q&A, and we'll be answering them after the sections that I mentioned. So drop them in the Q&A box below, please.
Got a few questions there. Let's make sure those questions are actually in the Q&A box, not the chat box. Much easier to monitor.
So if you drop them into the chat, just go there, copy it, drop it in the Q&A, please.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So sorry, I think this is still you.
That's all right. No, it's just, I guess, just summarizing the last sort of 20 minutes of what we've been talking about. If by following this strategy, you'll actually be in charge of creating the opportunities rather than passively waiting for listeners to reach out to you. Both work, right? We are obviously big fans of podcasting. That's why we've got an agency that does so. what we're trying to really promote is to take ownership over ROI opportunities landing at your feet rather than just passively putting something out and hoping it sticks. That is what we are. We're trying to provide an ROI.
All right. So let's dive into the recap when to actually use the strategy. So we talk about this. You fit into these 3 industries, or maybe there's a different industry. The bottom line is that you have a high customer lifetime value. So ideally SaaS and tech businesses, coaches and consultants, and B2B agency owners. And there are 3 pillars to make the strategy work. So you need to appear on podcasts, ideally regularly, not just one-off. You can spend extra 20 minutes per interview, so to prepare and then to follow up with the host after. And you have a high customer lifetime value. We shared the figure. It was at least $5,000 to make it really worth your while. So let's dive into this exciting last part. And I'm sorry if I'm, again, like Homer Simpson, because the screen is actually very bright. Elliot, we were thinking about if we should really offer this. It is something that we are experimenting with. It is something new. But I needed to sell you on this idea quite a bit, right?
Yes. We are essentially giving away quite a bit of value. However, I think it's important that people dip their toe into, I guess, how to, and there's a few questions that this is actually relevant to. Frederick's got one, which we'll answer in a minute. Oliver's got one, which we'll answer in a minute. This offer is, I guess, your first step into podcasting. Yeah. So Jakub, take it away. You're excited. Let's go.
I am excited. So, as we talk to a lot of different people who are interested in speaking on podcasts, very often we hear that they're not sure whether they are maybe podcast ready or they're interesting enough to appear on podcasts. They're not sure about the topics they would talk about, if they actually have something to talk about. And that's what we would actually like to help you with this £1,500 offer. So what we can do for you for free is that we'll work with you one-on-one and we'll help you to uncover your unique talking points. So those will be like 2-3 different topics that you can talk about on these podcasts. We'll help you identify your perfect listener. So who is that ideal listener that you should reach by speaking on podcasts? Is it the SaaS owner? Is it a leader in Fortune 500 company? Like, who is that ideal listener that you should get in front of? Because very often there might be more that you would like to target. So we'll help you to prioritize which one will be the best for you. And we'll help you to choose the best strategy tailored to you and your business. So we talk about multiple different strategies on how to work with hosts, how to turn your podcast into content. So we'll be talking about this as well. That is, the best. We'll help you to identify the best strategy for you. And the best part is actually that we will even build your podcast pitch page completely for free or included in this gift. Now, what is podcast pitch page? It's what we do for all our customers. This is Udi Ledegor, CMO of Gong. On this page, podcast hosts will find everything they need to know about you as a potential guest on their show. So what you see here, all the design, all the messaging, all the subheadlines, everything is written by us simply after a 1-hour conversation with you. We then do all the heavy lifting. Here are some of the topics, the descriptions of the topics. It's all done by us just after one interaction that is around 1 hour. This is another example, Paddle. I think it's now a unicorn in the UK. We worked with 3 of their speakers, including the founder, and also the topics. And lastly, this is Treasure Data, CDP platform, and again, some of the topics. So all you can see here will build for you as a speaker. Now, the thing is, you can then do 2 things. After you claim this gift, we built all of this for you. You can either use this page and start reaching out to hosts on your own with this amazing asset that will make it really easy. You will immediately stand out from all the guests that are reaching out to this podcast hosts. And this is the reason, why we're offering it on this webinar. Portion of you might decide to continue working with us, and we can share what it would look like if you decide to do so. Anyway, this will be yours regardless whether you decide to continue working with us. But there is actually a catch because it is so time intensive. It is not just something that we will share access with you, some digital digital course or something, we'll actually work with you. Our team will work with you. We'll only accept the first 5 people who will apply. And this is really not some like fake scarce tactic. It takes a lot of internal resources to do all of this. So on the next page, I will share the link, and this link will take you to the project requirements form or the onboarding form. This form is actually quite long. It takes around 5 to 10 minutes to fill in. And once you fill it in, it will basically help us to prepare for the onboarding call that you will schedule on the next page. So if you go to this URL, it will take you to the onboarding form. You will fill in the form. So as I'm talking right now, you can already open it, start filling it in, because we have some questions as well. And there are only 5 spots available because it takes a lot of internal resources. So let's dive into the Q&A section right now. We have quite a few questions. And
Q&A. Okay, so Oliver, is there a strategy to get asked to appear on podcasts more regularly?
Okay, so that's a great question. We have 14 minutes left, so I might take a little bit longer to answer this, but because I think it's relevant for a lot of people. It depends on what is your starting point. So if you are basically completely new in the, like, let's say, online presence, that you are just building your LinkedIn profile, you don't post regularly, but you do something interesting that you would like to share on podcasts, or you are already active on social media and people know you. Those are 2 different starting points based on which you will choose your strategy. So if you're just starting and you don't have the presence yet, then you really need to spend a lot of time researching the perfect podcasts and then reaching out to them manually via LinkedIn or email and proposing the topic that is the best for their podcast. So not giving them options of 4 different topics. Do the research, decide on one topic that you can deliver the most value on, pitch it to the podcast host, lead with relevancy. Why are you relevant to this podcast? Not with credibility. So lead why this episode will be amazing, and then share that you're Forbes 30 under 30. Not other way around. Podcast hosts don't really care about your credibility unless you're relevant. So if you don't have a presence, you need to go really hard on the heavy lifting of researching the podcast and writing the perfect pitch. If you already exist on social media, I think the best strategy to do is to connect with hosts, comment on their stuff, and let's say after a month of commenting, and just getting to know them, just reach out to them, and because they already know, like, and trust you, and then basically propose that they can work with you. So I think that would be another strategy.
Can we
podcast.
Yeah, obviously we did a webinar on this a couple of months ago. We can also share that with you, Oliver. The podcast. The webinar that
The webinar.
a couple of months ago, which is essentially what we do at Speak On Podcast, but we broke it down as to exactly what we do. Stuart, perhaps I've been on the wrong podcasts, but I have found the hosts to be really lax in dealing with guests pre-stroke during and post podcasts. I can answer this in that I've appeared on sort of 15 or 20 in the last couple of months. And I think maybe you have been on the wrong podcasts. Maybe wrong podcast is the wrong phrase, but that's certainly not been my experience of the podcasts that I've appeared on. I would maybe try and use systems like Listen Notes or Aphonics to try and appear on higher ranked podcasts. That way you are more likely to get more quality from the podcast. Using those systems as systems that we use for ourselves. There are sort of percentage rankings. That would be my advice. Jakub?
I think it depends on what is your goal, right? If you are in a position that you really want to just get used to speaking on podcasts, I think it's good to accept pretty much every podcast opportunity. But it's true, like, as guests are figuring out the best ways to get the most value out of the interview, some hosts are doing the same thing, right? It's not that all experience would be always high quality. some hosts still need some education on how to deliver a really good experience for the guest as well. Now, this is quite difficult, to predict that it will go like this, that the experience will be poor, because there's no way unless you actually get accepted on podcast to know. So I think that one of the things that Elliot mentioned is really to look into these higher ranked podcasts, but even that, it's never guaranteed that the experience will be amazing. It's real. I wouldn't say it's hit and miss, but there will be different qualities of these experiences always.
Cool. A few comments saying that the link isn't working. We will fix it immediately after the podcast, after the webinar, and reshare it. So thank you for flagging that, Frederick. Awesome. Frederick actually does ask a question, which is, I want to reach out to life science podcast hosts, having a hard time finding them as it's not a very common area. Any suggestions?
I would go to listennotes.com, which is a podcast database. On that page, I would search for some keywords that are super relevant to your target audience. So life science, I would search for it in quotes. And then you can either rank it by episodes. So if that keyword is basically is mentioned in the episode title or description, or you can sort it by podcasts, and it will give you all podcasts that with this specific keyword that you chose for in the list. So I would identify 5 to 10 different keywords that are relevant to your target audience, and I would search for them on Listen Notes. And there's a big chance that it will give you podcasts that are highly relevant in your industry. Now, what I'm doing with the link, it should redirect you to speakonpodcasts.com/project requirements. I will share it now in the chat. So please make sure that you'll go here. It should take you to this link. I just posted in the chat. So you should see the form basically like this.
Just while you're doing that, Stuart, the podcast rating site that we shared last time, I'm pretty sure you're talking about Listen Notes, which Jakob is just going to pull up. So it's listennotes.com. And in there, that's everything that I was just explaining. Jakob was just explaining around the Boolean search of life sciences. That is the site that we typically use there. So hopefully that answers your question. And unless there's any more questions, I think we are coming to a natural end. Jakob, it has been amazing.
As usual. Yeah. I mean, we are getting into the
interactive crowd. And Alex, keep your cat off the keyboard, because that is dangerous. Alex's cat ran across the keyboard and typed some numbers.
If you like to use that link that we just posted, speakonpodcast.com/project requirements, please do it yourself. Don't allow your cats to fill it in, because it will really help us to prepare for the onboarding call. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. We are getting into the rhythm of doing these webinars. We'll be doing it more often, actually.
Yeah, it's good. And getting sort of 50, 60, 70 people turning up regularly is great. It's amazing. So guys, thank you so much. Look forward to speaking to you guys soon, and have a fantastic afternoon.
Awesome. Thank you very much, El, and thanks everyone for joining.
Cheers, guys. Peace and love.
Bye-bye.